Just because we're allies, it doesn't mean that we no longer have the right to think for ourselves, said French President Emmanuel Macron. Welcome back to N.D.P. News. If you're new and want to have the best coverage of international events, take a moment to subscribe to our channel and hit the notification bell to stay up to date with our future content. Today, we'll dive into this statement by France's head of state and understand what the statement means for France's current political relations with China. Let's get into it. In the aftermath of Chinese leader Xi Jinping's recent re-election to a third five-year term as president, which effectively cements his hold on power for the foreseeable future, numerous leaders and diplomats from around the world have been making their way to Beijing. Of particular note are the visits by European leaders, including French President Emmanuel Macron, accompanied by European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen, and Spanish Prime Minister Pedro Sanchez, among others. German Foreign Minister Annalena Baerbock also recently arrived in the northeast port city of Tianjin, following a visit by Chancellor Olaf Scholz in November. Even the European Union's foreign policy chief, Josep Borrell, was slated to visit China this April, but unfortunately had to cancel his trip after testing positive for COVID-19 for the 27-nation trading bloc. The reasons for these visits to China are multifaceted. In particular, as an ally of Russian President Vladimir Putin, Xi could play a pivotal role in helping to end the ongoing conflict in Ukraine. This conflict has been ongoing for over a year now and has had numerous detrimental effects, including driving up energy prices and inflicting further damage on economies that are still struggling to recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. As such, the Europeans are keen to enlist Xi's assistance in this regard. They are hopeful that he will be able to engage with both the Ukrainian and Russian presidents, although they do not necessarily see him as the key mediator in this situation. They have also expressed concerns that China might supply weapons to Russia, particularly in light of Putin's recent plans to deploy tactical nuclear weapons to Belarus, which has alarmed EU officials. This announcement came just days after Xi and Putin met to further cement their no-limits friendship. Baerbock has made it clear that ending the conflict in Ukraine is a top priority for her. And for the EU as a whole, she has praised Beijing for its role in easing tensions between Saudi Arabia and Iran, but has also cautioned that China's influence vis-a-vis Russia will have consequences for Europe as a whole, and for the EU's relationship with China specifically. If you're enjoying the video, please subscribe to the channel and give this video a like as we move on. The geopolitical landscape of EU-China relations, challenges and prospects. The European Union, EU, has been closely monitoring the situation in the Taiwan Strait, with deep concerns over a potential military escalation. The situation was further compounded when China launched military exercises immediately after French President Emmanuel Macron's visit to the region. It is worth noting that while the United States, US, has strategic and military interests in Taiwan, the Europeans primarily view the island in economic and pro-democracy terms. Against this backdrop, the recent visits to China by top EU officials were aimed at reassuring Chinese President Xi Jinping of the EU's respect for Beijing's control over all Chinese territory and urging calm. These visits also highlight the difficulties that the US faces in building a coalition of countries to exert pressure on China's expansionist policies. A senior EU official, who spoke on condition of anonymity, explained that the key objective of these visits was to maintain the status quo, which has worked well for all sides for decades. Nevertheless, beyond the geopolitical concerns lies the issue of business, which is crucial for both the EU and China. The two sides engaged in trade worth more than 2.3 billion euros, $2.5 billion every day last year, and the EU is keen to maintain this trade relationship without endangering it. Nevertheless, the EU's trade deficit with China has more than tripled over the past decade, and the EU is keen to level the playing field in terms of business. Moreover, the EU is also keen to reduce its dependence on China for critical resources, such as rare earth minerals and high-tech components. This move comes after the EU successfully weaned itself off its biggest and most unreliable gas supplier, Russia. The EU is now faced with the challenge of securing a reliable and sustainable supply of these critical resources, and reducing dependence on China is seen as a key objective. China's multipolar world, challenging U.S. dominance in global affairs. In the intricate world of geopolitics, the art of diplomacy involves walking a fine line between various competing interests, and China has proven itself to be a master of the game. Over the past 2 decades, the Chinese government has employed a skillful combination of economic incentives and political maneuvering to lure traditional allies of the United States, such as France and Germany, away from their long-standing ties with the U.S. The Chinese Communist Party has consistently called for a multipolar world, which is a reference to its frustration with the United States' dominant position in global affairs. China's leadership has made it clear that it wants to establish itself as a leading international power. Chinese Foreign Minister Qin Gang, who voiced his concern to reporters last month, said China-Europe relations are independent, not targeted or subject to any third party. This statement is representative of China's desire to assert itself on the world stage and to demonstrate that it can play a significant role in shaping international affairs. French President Emmanuel Macron's recent visit to China seems to highlight Qin's views. As tensions between Beijing and Washington continue to escalate, Macron has emphasized the importance of Europe maintaining its strategic autonomy. He has emphasized that being an ally doesn't mean sacrificing one's sovereignty or the right to think independently. However, such statements have raised eyebrows both in the US and within the EU itself. Some European leaders are wary of growing too close to China, given the country's questionable human rights record and its growing influence in international affairs. Polish Prime Minister Mateusz Morawiecki, for instance, has warned that some in Europe have been too slow to heed the wake-up call on China. Despite the differences in national emphasis, the EU strategy on China has remained consistent since it was established in 2019. The Asian giant is seen as a partner, a competitor, and systemic rival, and the recent visits by European leaders aim to secure China's commitment to peace, ensure fair trade, and reduce Europe's dependence on China for critical resources. The White House has attempted to downplay Macron's talk of Europe as an independent pole in a multipolar world. However, U.S. officials have noted that European skepticism towards China is growing, as evidenced by recent Dutch decisions to restrict China's access to advanced computer chip components, and German Finance Minister Olaf Scholz's public call for Xi Jinping not to deliver weapons to Russia. Let us know your thoughts about these events in the comment section below. And while you're at it, why not take a moment to support the channel by dropping a like? This has been N.D.P News. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next one.